From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, glad to be back with you on another episode.
It's always great connecting with you, Steve, and look forward to this topic.
Yes, I agree, and we've been enjoying this conversation, and we're on a good roll here. So please keep the questions coming in and let us know what you want us to talk about, and we're here for you. So it's important that we keep in touch with our audience, and please keep reaching out to us. For today, we're going to talk about the importance and the understanding a little bit more about modules and drivers and what that is in the AV control world. So modules, drivers, plugins, there's a lot of different names for a lot of things. Back in the day, it used to be called macros. There's a whole assortment of things that you can call. Basically, what we're talking about here is a package of code, let's call it, that's purposeful and either it commonly interfaces with a product, but there's also times where you can use it to perform a particular function or application. So you can use, say, a module or a driver to talk to a display or a codec or a switcher. You could also use it if you wanted to implement, say, passwords or timers or different things of that nature. And these are the building blocks that programmers commonly use. And many of the manufacturers have libraries that are built. Some of them are official, let's call it, that are under the umbrella of the manufacturer, and others are more of purpose-built or built by other programmers that either get exchanged or are used in their arsenal. So without going on and on, James, I know a lot of people have mixed feelings, when it comes to using modules and drivers, because on one hand, they're super important because there's usually never enough time to have to sit down and figure out all the complex API and interface with the device. But on the other hand, there's trust that has to be built to know that the module or driver that you use is going to be effective for what you need. What's been your experience?
I'm personally is when I do modules, drivers, I more use ones I've written, and that goes to more of a control, I want to say, mentality instead of a useful mentality. Like, I know there's tons of great drivers out there, and I have used them, but it's more of, if I write the code, I know what's supposed to do. So if there's a bug, I can figure it out quickly. Unlike if there is a bug in a driver or a module, now I got to contact the person who wrote it to figure out what's going on. So that's just my personal feeling there. I know other people rely heavily on modules and drivers and have great systems. But like I said, my personal, it's more of a power control thing, I would say, where I like to have that control over it.
And I've heard that a lot, actually, and I'm sure that comes from bad experiences. And the other side too is that knowing that you have the source code and you know that you can troubleshoot the inner workings, which may or may not be something that's available if you're using a module or a driver that's written by somebody else. The idea, I think, also when it comes to doing configuration is that these are pretty essential, because without them, you really are not able to interface with some devices, because unless you have less resources to be able to interface with complex devices. Let me frame it differently. And while you could send direct strings and receive a response, you might not be able to do some of the complex processing required in a configuration platform that you can do in a programming language. So therefore, a driver or module is pretty essential. There are a lot of manufacturers these days, and this is something that's kind of near and dear to me because it's one of the things that my company does, is that a lot of manufacturers that are looking to have their own modules built for them to ensure that their products work a certain way and that they have something that they know is proven and that they use it as a competitive advantage, because the difference between two different products that are very similar in the marketplace may be the ease of control. When it comes to a situation like specifying equipment, does the availability of a modular driver come into play for you?
For me, no. What I personally more look for is reliability of the product itself, because I the internet's full of great people. Even if I can't find answers on my Google search, we can network. I mean, I'm sure if I ran into I bought product and I couldn't control it, I could reach out to Steve and Control Concept or any of the other program communities out there to get some direction. So having the availability of modules and drivers are a little less important for me, and I more look for the reliability of the product and the manufacturer, and that stays with our standards.
Which is, I certainly think that comes into play, and without that, it doesn't matter how good a modular driver might be, right?
Yep.
So having a good solid product is certainly key. The other side of the coin is that if you're developing systems, and we've talked a little bit about having, say, a junior programmer, or having somebody who's a student worker work with you, or just having training somebody to roll things out, would you typically give them a modular driver that you would write and tell them to implement it to take that out of the equation? Or do you feel like you're not giving them the full experience of needing to program a system?
That's a good question there. I think I hate using this answer, but it all depends. Depends on the situation. I almost wanted to say that I would say if we had the time, like if time wasn't a issue and the flexibility, if I had a junior programmer or student worker looking to learn programming, I would say maybe I would have them create a module. So we would have our general code, but say like, all right, we are always using X brand displays. Well, go build me a driver or a module for that. And this way they have their goal, they have their limitation, but they get to program.
The I think it's an good answer, and it makes them really understand what it takes to make something work. Similar to what you mentioned earlier about being able to troubleshoot something when it doesn't work, and understanding how it talks. The other angle on that is that if you have devices, so if you're working consistently with the same brand and you have more of the ability to swap out products that use the same control codes, your life should be fairly easy. But then when you are looking at needing to upgrade some rooms or upgrade some systems, and you need to change out a product, being able to pull out one module and put in another one and have that kind of snap in can be a real lifesaver versus having to rework your code in addition to control that product.
Oh yes, we've done that with our systems before I took over programming, we did have a lot of modules and drivers, and that was godsend at times, I would say, because I know the one space we were having problem with some displays that was one manufacturer, and we switched them over to our standard manufacturer that were more reliable and integrated consistently in our campus. And we were able to reach out to, at that time, our third party programmer who was able just to upload the drivers for that manufacturer, and he didn't have to change all his code.
So I think, when we talked recently in an episode about software developers and programmers and how why what that transition looks like and why those skills are valuable. I think in this regard, some devices are just naturally a complex to work with, and even the most most skilled AV programmers may need to work with somebody in a software development world to be able to control a particular device, or even access some of the functionality that is needed. Maybe it's even to be able to do some complex features like access a database or so on. And that's where I think the power of a module or driver, where you could have somebody almost like work to build you the components that you need to be able to then make your system work. But to your point, you want that person also to keep you in the loop, and maybe that's a great way to learn. So you have somebody write this module, and then perhaps they hand it off to you, educate you on what they did, so that you can feel more comfortable. But that effort to do it initially can be well beyond either what time or budget or even the current skill set can afford.
Oh, definitely. I'm finding that myself. There's times that I could benefit from having a the extra hands with programming and handling some of this stuff, creating the modules. So like I did that on one project because we had one product we were using. It only was in one room, and then we kept finding more and more use cases for it. And I've looked at the manufacturer's module for it, and I didn't like how it worked and how it interfaced with the way I wrote code. So I wrote my own, and it saves time when I'm deploying these systems out. So I'm definitely learning to trust modules more. It just that's my own personal thing. I don't want to lose that control yet.
Yeah, I get that. And there was one thing that we kindly call like a limited functionality module. So sometimes you just write something that does what you need it to do at the time and isn't necessarily comprehensive. So it's something just to be aware of, because you may be in a situation where you need that one function, or you need to take advantage of a feature that is, as you mentioned, not used that often. But if you don't take the time to build it in the beginning, then you're kind of have to take a step back and go back to the drawing board to update your module before you could update your code.
Yep.
I think that that's probably a good place for us to wrap, as this is a good topic that we can certainly discuss, and probably gets misunderstood a bit. And different people have different different mindsets about it. And what James is mentioning, I think is commonly said. And I think that in our world, we haven't really gotten used to the idea of sharing code as much as maybe other industries, and having these types of conversations and being able to help each other do our jobs better, and be able to focus on the areas that you're most effective can really be valuable. And modules and drivers are one way to do that. So James, how can people get in touch with you and also keep up on the other content that you're producing.
Yeah, that so if folks want to connect with me, I'm on Twitter. AV_James King is my handle. I am on LinkedIn as well, James King. And I do write a monthly article for the higheredav.com website, which is the IT and AV column. And I'm also a weekly member on AV Life, as well as this podcast.
And once in a while, you get to come up for air.
Yeah, once in a while.
So for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social media platforms. As James said, connect on LinkedIn. I try to post there probably most consistently, but also on Twitter, especially on Sunday mornings. And you could read some of my writing on AV Technology, which is avnetwork.com. But please check us out on YouTube, Apple, Google, anywhere you find your podcasts, and leave us a comment, share the episode. It'd be a really flattering honor and reward for us to know that more people can hear about us, learn, and gain valuable knowledge from what we're talking about. Without further ado, that's all we have for today on Ask the Programmer.